Good afternoon. I hope I'm clearly audible. Today, as I mentioned in my post, I want to talk about a very old 1970s Czechoslovakian film. The film is entitled Witchhammer. This is a very important film from the perspective of Czechoslovakian cinema. I won't claim that this was one of the greatest films and everybody must watch this film. This was a very good film from the perspective of its social relevance. And this is precisely I want to talk about this film today. Because in our times, we normally relate art with entertainment, and of course majority of us are engaged with various forms of art only in the sense of entertainment. Okay. But the art, like cinema, will also have long-lasting impact. This cinema can make people aware about certain important things of their own society. And at the same time, this kind of art, including cinema, can also be used to brainwash the group of people. Okay. So, art can influence the audience positively and negatively, and it completely depends on how it is encoded and presented to the people. So, within this boundary, I want to talk about the movie Witchhammer, which was a 1970 released film and was primarily a Czechoslovakian film, but it was also dubbed and released in other parts of the world. It is also available with English subtitles. The film was directed by Otakar Vavra, who was one of the important filmmakers of his time in Czechoslovakia. And this film was adapted from the novel called Kladivo na Charodejin Des Nice. I might be wrong in pronunciation because I don't know anything about Czechoslovakian language. But this novel was written by Václav Kaplicki. The movie relates the story of the Northern Moravia witch trials of the 1670s. So movie basically talks about something that has happened 400 years back. Okay. And this was based on historical evidences actually written in the novel, and movie adopts that novel. Now this movie focuses on a priest, Christoph Lautner, played by Romanchik, who falls victim to this witch hunt after opposing the trials. Now this was actually a very interestingly presented in the movie. In the very first scene, we see that the Sunday church goers are there in the church, and there was one old beggar, a lady, who was also there, and after the prayer she receives the bread. Okay. Like by rule, the bread is put in the mouth by the priest, and the devotee has to eat that. But this old beggar, she took out the bread and she hides in her small handkerchief. So the priest sees that and they arrested her, because it was a time when there was a lot of what we call belief in the black magic. So this beggar was captured and presented in front of the church court, and in that court they decided that she was actually trying to steal this bread to do the black magic, and basically black magic went against the idea of Christianity and the Bible, and that means it was a crime at that time. The title of the movie is Witchhammer. It is a Czechoslovakian film directed by Otakar Vavra. Now, once this lady is captured, the priest himself suggests that we should invite an inquisitor. The inquisitor is a special designation. Inquisitor is a judge specializing in witchcraft trials. And on the request of the priest, the royal family invited Boblik von and Edelstedt, who was a very notorious and very infamous kind of inquisitor. That is, whenever he is there has been no counter argument, that whoever has come in his court as a criminal has always received the death penalty. So there was no chance of other judgment. Like, there is no possibility that the person who is suspect will be free. Now, Christoph Lautner, the priest, he was part of this trial committee, but he realizes that the trials are wrong, and there is a lot of what we call beating during the imprisonment to these victims, and from each victim, not victim actually, the criminals, according to them, from each criminal they used to get number of names, and then they would arrest them as well. So what happened, as an audience, we could also see that in the movie, that whosoever opposes these trials, their name would turn up in the next hearing and they will be imprisoned immediately. So this is where the inquisitor Bobling commences a kind of everlasting series of trials. And in this case, Bobling had a very, very clear idea. That is, he followed a book. It was titled Malleus Maleficarum. This book was his guide, and he wouldn't bother whether the other so-called criminals are coming from reputed families, or they are also the priest, they were also serving the church. Irrespective of anything, Bobling would identify them, torture them with the help of his people, and make them confess in the court, and ultimately give them death punishment. They were all burnt on the altar. This is the primary story of the film. Ultimately, the hero of the film, as I said, Christoph Lautner, he was also sentenced to death, and once he dies, the film ends. So there was no what we call positive end to this story. Witch hunting went on and on. Now this film contains a possible allegory, because many of the film critics of the time and present time have read this film symbolically. They were not trying to see the film as it is, rather they saw a kind of symbolism, allegory about communist show trials in Czechoslovakia. And this is where the film becomes important. The film talks about certain political extremism and the way the other ideology people were punished by these political extremists is allegorically presented in the name of witch hunting. And we see in the movie that the trials were almost akin to what we see in these political trials. Whoever opposes will become the victim on a very next hearing, because they don't want any opposition, and that thing is presented very, very clearly and very interestingly in the movie. It's an obviously 1970 film. It's a black and white film, and the court trial sequences are very, very disturbing, because as an audience we know that the so-called criminals are speaking the truth, and still their truths are being twitched and broken, and they were also punished there in front of the court so that these so-called criminals will accept whatever the court wanted them to accept. Eventually Boblig only remains on the committee. The rest of the people are all punished. So this is where I want to bring it back, the idea that how cinema or any other such form, like this was a novel originally, so any other such art form can present the things in an indirect manner, and probably that is where the art enters. If you want, you have to make things very, very literal. If you have to present things in a very literal manner, then probably you are not making an art. You are reporting something. You are writing a journalistic article, or you are making a documentary. But it's the art that brings the subtlety, the metaphoricalness, the indirectness, which makes things not only consumable and comprehensible, but also interesting for the common man, and they will take some interest in knowing more about the things that they have gone through in the movie. So I wish all of us could see this movie again and again and learn from it, because things are changing very fast. Witch hunting is both what we call in court, out court, is a very normal phenomena during that time, and probably it's coming back very fast. So all the best to all of us. Thank you for joining. I would like to see your comments, and I'll also try to respond to those comments, or probably take up some of those comments in next live. Yeah, I'm not talking about adaptation theory right now, but yes, Tatvamasi was a novel and Reva was a film. Novel is written for a very specific kind of audience. Reva was made for what we call public consumption. So considering that fact, there has been a lot of what we call changes brought in to make it marketable, and that is where of course Reva was a good film, and it brought Tatvamasi into discussion, that there will be plenty of people who would read Tatvamasi after watching Reva. So that is, film cannot be what we call very loyal to the book, but as Andre Bazin says, film can be a good digest for the book. So once you watch the film, then you go back to book and you will have a new perspective on the book as well. Another important aspect in adaptation is that adaptation is an adaptation of one reading of the novel or book. As a director, I am reading a book and I like certain aspects of it, and that's why I am adopting it. But it cannot be a kind of holistic understanding of the book. You may read that book and you may have a different understanding, or the same director might read that book after 10 years and that person will have a different understanding and can make another film from the same book. So film is always coming from one reading of the book, while reading a book is basically reading the subtlety of what is there in the book, and we will always what we call take up multiple interpretations when we are reading a book. Fine. Coming back to Witchhammer, it was also based on a book, and director has probably thought that this should come to the general discussion, and that's why the director used that novel to make a film, so that something that has happened in 1670, okay, the people living in 1970 can also witness and can also think about their past and probably learn from that past. Okay. Because if we don't learn from history, we are doomed to live it again, right? So I think I'll stop here. Thank you for joining, and I would love to see your comments.